is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Blue economy and maritime affairs.
The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
It's 10 minutes after 7 o'clock, and this is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation on this Wednesday, the 28th of January. And we enter into our first conversation for the morning. And we're going to be looking at the infrastructure fund. Did you know there was something like that? Yes, there is. Where a lot of the money that will go from public sale will then get into for infrastructure development. Or so we are told. And we're going to have that conversation today, as we do. Our live streams are up on YouTube, Facebook, and on X. Our audience on KTN, welcome again as we get into this conversation. This one we want to be able to then be able to open up and gather knowledge and understanding. And if you don't understand it, then perhaps now is the time for us to then be able to dig into it just a little bit deeper. Two gentlemen help us out with that conversation this morning to then be able to look into the intrigues and details of all of this. Dismas Mokua is a political risk analyst. Dismas, good morning.
The political risk analyst.
Oh, the. Yeah, okay, we have to be very careful about the demonstrative article that we use here.
Yeah, we don't want to confuse brands.
All right. Okay.
The. Yes.
Okay. The political risk analyst. Dismas Mokua is here. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
How are you doing?
I cannot complain.
Okay.
I'm on top of the world.
Okay. There's a song about that, but anyway, we'll sing that later. Maliba Arnold, Nyajai. In fact, if you were in Nigeria, I'll call you Nyajai.
That's exactly how it sounds.
Is that how it's pronounced here as well?
Yes.
Oh, very good. So we're not going to struggle too much.
It's probably Nigerian.
Nah.
No. And you have Yoruba ancestors.
Anyway, I'm Bantu, and Bantus came originally from present-day Western Cameroon,
Yes.
and Eastern Nigeria.
Northeastern Nigeria. Yeah.
Specifically, the TV people are Bantus.
TV people from Benue State, actually.
Yeah, in
just
Benue
west
State,
of the Benue River.
So the TV people are considered as the Bantus who stayed home.
Okay. So it's possible that you could actually be an Ajayi, but we'll have that as another conversation we'll have later.
Should we call ice on him?
He also sits as the party leader of the Progress Plus Alliance, and he's here with us this morning as well. Karibu Sana.
Asante.
Speaking of other countries, Dennis is this week taking us to Benin.
Yes. It's a beautiful country. 17th and 19th century, they have an elite unit that was predominantly women protecting the kingdom. So when you talk about gender equality, it started in the 17th and 19th century here in the continent. But also one thing about Benin is they are the largest producers of cotton in the continent. One asks the question, is it for export? Is it for value addition? And how is it benefiting the people of Benin? One would hope that they produce and add value on that so that they sell at maximum profits. But let's go to the proverb. The chameleon changes color, but it does not change its destination. Mukwa, how would you interpret that?
Can we allow the Nigerian man first?
Nigerian man come first.
I mean, I think probably what it means is, and I'm glad that you said, or other times above number you said one is never right or wrong, is that if you set up a destination or you want some objectives to be achieved, the only thing you need to be reviewing is your strategy. You do not lose sight of the ball. So maybe in the Kenyan context, President Ruto wants us to go to Singapore. We may go by road, air.
Or we might walk there.
Okay. But we'll still get there at the end of the day.
Arnold.
I think changing color is strategy, or rather means, but the end is the same. So for the chameleon, changing color is probably part and parcel of the means of how it gets to where it's going, but it keeps focused. So I don't think there will be much to it other than the means to an end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Well,
Indeed. So Kenya is in the process of setting up a national infrastructure fund, which is now starting to be known as the NIF. It's a large dedicated financing vehicle aimed at mobilizing capital for major long-term infrastructure projects in the country. This is part of a broader strategy to accelerate development, to reduce reliance on public borrowing, and attract private and institutional investment into priority sectors. Structure and purpose of this fund, it has already been approved by Cabinet, that we know, and it's being structured as a limited liability company to provide flexibility and commercial discipline. It's designed to pool resources from financing major public infrastructure. The two big ones that we already know about are KPC and Safaricom, including energy, transport, irrigation, water, sanitation, and digital networks with multi-year planning horizons. The aim is to ensure financial continuity for large-scale projects beyond the limits of annual government budgeting cycles. Capish? It's good, no, Arnold?
First of all, it would be important to start from a point where we actually say it for what it is.
Okay.
In William Ruto's Kenya, any project that has got a presidential level endorsement and marketing is a qualified scandal.
Okay, you're coming out guns blazing this morning. Why?
So, when we speak about the National Infrastructure Fund, the level of the presidential support that has actually come with it tells you one thing, that the National Infrastructure Fund is not about roads. It's actually escaping budget. It's a backroom access to money. Or probably, let me put it this way, that since 2024, the president discovered that budgets are polarizing. You are not going to go to parliament today and seek to move the debt ceiling. You will not introduce new taxes without resistance. So then what happens? You have to look for money through other alternatives. So the president has escaped the budgeting cycle. He wants a pot of money where he can dip in his hand and get money as he wishes with as little control as possible. So the NIF, from the very start, is being marketed as a non-debt. But how do you define debt? You do not do away with debt by renaming it. Debt remains debt even if you renamed it. So long as the word leverage is used, then automatically we're going to talk about securitization. So we can look at that later on. So this has nothing to do with infrastructure, but it has got two more important things because you look at the timing and why the urgency. Number one, the president needs a lot of money to put up programs that can actually buy loyalty, populist projects. And secondly, from the projects, so long as it's construction, you expect that there are going to be serious kickbacks the way it's done in this particular country. So the president wants to raise money for campaign.
Okay.
So for me, there are two things. Number one, escape the budgeting cycle. Number two, raise money for populist projects. Number three, raise kickbacks to finance his re-election. That is the only reason why he is going all out and why it is necessary now.
But it's like the chameleon, no? Chameleon is going to change its color. You can do one thing today, do another thing tomorrow, but it's getting to a certain destination. It's like serendipity. All these events come together and you reach a particular outcome. Pundits might say that, okay, it's me using a different route, but he's going to get where he... And people are already talking about, in my constituency,
the problem is
6 roads already will be done.
The problem is that we are being told this is the new way of financing large projects, so there will be no taxes. That's what we are being told. No taxes. You just have roads. As in, you cannot market equity as free money, and so long as we actually are using public assets to finance that. So that is not free money. We are simply mortgaging tomorrow so that we look solvent today.
Okay. Dismas.
Yes.
The CS Treasury actually sat where Arnold is sitting, and he told us the reason why they are coming up with a limited liability company to then be able to manage this infrastructure fund is because government is unable. So it was a major indictment on government that it's too much bureaucracy. There's too much red tape to cut through to get some of these things actually done. So they needed funds to be managed. They needed these projects then to be, highlighted, and then needed people to just get to work. Do you see a problem with that, or does it make sense?
Well, there are many ways of looking at it, but if you look at the infrastructure fund using a political lens, then you start looking at the personalities driving it. it's very easy to get lost in the political conversations. But when you look at the infrastructure funds where they've been a huge success, like Canada or India or Chile, is the purpose is to ensure that you finance large-scale projects without necessarily having to use tax. Going back to Mora and Wanjiro and using taxation as a strategy to get resources. But the challenge you have in Kenya is a trust deficit or a trust crisis, that when President Ruto says anything, probability of people believing it is almost zero. I mean, right now, I see the sun is coming out. So if President Ruto tells the Kenyans the sky is blue, about 50% will need to get outside to really confirm whether the sky is indeed blue. Now, again, some of the people who've been communicating about this fund, they do it in a manner which is a bit condescending and they're a bit arrogant. They say we have a solution, we are placing it on the table, and you have to take it. Now, we've got a constitution, 2010 constitution, which is still referred as a new constitution, which allows for public participation. In my view, there needs to be very clear public participation. There needs to be a very good communication strategy to tell people exactly what is the fund all about, and what are the benefits. And part of the reason why people are beginning to cast aspersions on the fund, including the gentleman on my right, is the legal framework. Is it going to be a limited liability company? What are the merits and demerits? Could it be formed by an act of parliament so that there is a parliamentary oversight? And are you going to select the people to run this fund? Because all successful funds across the world, they are marked by three things that we've said times above number. The persons who run the fund must have character, they must have capacity, and they must have competence. In Kenya, some appointments are made and people say, wow, that person fits the role. You recall the current Commissioner General, Kare, when he was appointed, his CV was flying all over Nairobi, and people said, wow, that gentleman fits the role. Now, if you create a framework where you assure Kenyans that the people who are going to be appointed to manage this fund have got character, capacity, and competence, and then you make sure that you immunize this thing from all these vagaries. In other words, that this fund is going to be defined by meritocracy. That the people who are going to manage this thing have to be some of the sharpest tools in Kenya. And anybody who's going to joke with those resources, maybe it's going to be shot dead. You know, we use the Japanese model or the Chinese model. That if you play around with public resources, then, you don't understand in Japan, you make a mistake, you're better off committing suicide. Yeah. But you see, some of the appointments that are made in Kenya leave people with their own. And that is the reason, part of the reason why people are really getting frustrated. I've been having conversations with some subject matter experts. There's a gentleman called Moses Chelanga. He's a lawyer with considerable expertise in public finance. And he says there are many frameworks to do this. And Kenyans should not be worried whether it's going to be a limited liability company, whether it's going to be through an act of parliament, that you can come up with infrastructure to ensure that these resources are carefully managed. And the long-term purpose of this infrastructure fund is not just to come with roads. You know, we've been complaining that Kenya is an expensive destination for maybe manufacturing, that we are not, the economists talk about comparative advantages, competitive advantages, and all those. But how do you make Kenya a manufacturing zone so that we take advantage of the benefits of globalization and production? People come and manufacture in Kenya. They use it as a base. There's a lot of business which has moved from Kenya going to Zimbabwe or Egypt for especially fast-moving consumer goods. This kind of infrastructure projects can benefit from this fund so that we become very competitive. If someone wants to do business in Africa, they know Kenya is the first choice. Last evening, I was taking a walk around Kileleshwa. I saw many properties. A gentleman has put up a property called Crystal Homes. And I was having conversations. Those Crystal Homes are very beautiful. But the reason why the visibility is not very clear is because in Kenya, part of the reason why you've got expensive properties is lack of serviced land. If you're going to put up a house, you buy a piece of land, then you have to work on the water infrastructure, you have to work on roads, you have to work on the utilities, so you raise the costs. But if you have got this fund and is dedicated to some of those projects, it could even reduce the cost of housing in Kenya, make people afford, have a better lifestyle. So in my view, contrary to what Arnold Maliba has said, and you give him the green light to say it because he's a politician, is if you create very good accountability and transparent measures around this fund, one would easily say this is what the medical doctors recommended. However, if you don't have that kind of infrastructure, then it can easily become somebody's cash cow.
But one would ask the question. Let's look at the two companies that are on the chopping board or on the board, right? So let's look at the Kenya Pipeline. The Kenya Pipeline Company is one of the best performing companies that the Kenya government has today. One would look at the profits it's making and ask the question, why do you want to privatize a company that is doing very well? You look at Safaricom, one asks the question, why do you want to do that? And even explanations that have been given, we are underselling whatever we're putting in the market. So one asks the question then, are we not able to improve on resources that we do have for us to get the maximum profits from that and inject the same back into the economy? Or is this privatization talk just another conduit for people to benefit from it?
I've had Mokwa go on and try to paint to us a picture about the ideal. There's the ideal and then there's the real. Mm-hmm. I want him to remember that as we address this issue, remember that we are in William Ruto's Kenya. So do not forget that. Even as you go around that.
Let's just say we're in Kenya with William Ruto as president.
Okay. We are in Kenya on William Ruto's watch. And for everything, look at the headlines today. We have got 11 billion shillings again as a scandal. Mm-hmm. These are issues that you and I have had conversations around it. So it's not fair to actually feed Kenyans on hope. Hope is a good breakfast. I know it's in the morning, but it's a terrible dinner. So we cannot always keep on working around that. I need to actually emphasize this, that the National Infrastructure Fund has nothing, totally nothing to do with development. It's about power. It's about elections. It's about money. And that money, the president wants money off the budget, off oversight, and off radar completely. That is what it is about. The president wants a pot of money where he can get his hand in and do with it as he wishes without oversight.
And how do you know this?
And because, number one, what happened is that sometimes last year, Parliament worked around the Privatization Act. Mm-hmm. We didn't know about this then. But then Parliament ceded its power to oversight sale of public assets. Now, the Cabinet alone and the Privatization Authority can actually work that. Imagine you're a watchman having an agreement with a potential thief that you can come in without me looking at you. We will actually sort that after you have come in. And that is what...
We'll ask you what you want when you're in the gates. Okay.
So that is what Thomas Paine will actually call power without accountability. Is actually what Thomas Paine will call the prerogative of a prostitute. Strong political philosophy wording, but we have got people. If we had a parliament, the truth is that if we had a parliament, they will actually know that we have given them power. They will need to be accountable to the people. When Parliament cedes its power, like they did in the Privatization Act aspect where they ceded that particular control. Mm-hmm. And William plays the long game. So first of all, push Parliament to cede their control over the sale of public assets. And then now you come in with a beautiful name called the National Infrastructure Fund. We're talking about power here.
Allow me to follow you just a little bit.
Yeah.
So from what you're saying is that long before we heard the announcement of this National Infrastructure Fund that was to be set up, that Parliament had gone ahead and paved the way for this to happen, because what you're essentially saying is you can then go ahead and announce the divestiture, whether in part or whole, of assets, and we won't ask you questions about it. So you can go ahead and do that at will. Is that what we're saying?
The Cabinet can actually proceed with the Privatization Authority, but you see, in the days of old, you had to go to Parliament for every asset or the process. Now, Parliament willingly, it's out there, Parliament willingly went ahead. So you cannot actually say that actually happened by accident. It's by design. So we are at a place where Parliament already has been taken out of the equation, because once it comes to Parliament, it's very noisy. There's too much noise about
Debate,
it. There's too much publicity around it. So now William Ruto is going to actually have this spot, because I can tell you the only speed bump in the way is the court order that stops that particular bit.
Yeah.
So even as the Speaker was telling members of Parliament yesterday that probably, is it 56 or 58% will not be coming in, he's actually very optimistic. Because I don't know where that actual mathematics is coming in. That's being idealistic, because the attrition rate will actually be much higher after
About 80%.
After 25th June. The attrition rate will be much, much higher, because the same people who are dying to defend the finance bill gave the president a standing ovation when he voided the same process. So you look at where that is going. And you know what happens? The president has got about 200, I think, and 40 billion shillings from Safaricom.
Yes.
KPC will be coming in with about 100 or so billion. So once the president raises about 500 billion shillings in that particular pot, remember the wording even from Parliament talks about leveraging. What is leveraging? Leveraging. So where are we heading with that? We are going straight into securitization. So with 500 billion, you can go into the equity market and raise about 2 trillion shillings. So with 2 trillion shillings, and you're putting it into construction across the country. You remember in the last State of the Nation address, the president again got a standing ovation when he listed so many roads that he was actually going to dualize and talk. And people, Parliament is no longer a late endorser to the budget making process. Parliament is actually a budget making body. Yes. These are the people who are standing up and clapping for him as if he had brought a miracle solution. So the president is promising no taxes, no pain. All that you have is basic. You will have the roads, you will have the rails, you will have the port, you will have whatever you want, because now he's telling these people that, and he's telling all of us that this is an undebt.
Yeah.
But it feeds into debt, because we are leveraging public assets. And I saw an attempt to equate the sports fund and the National Infrastructure Fund. That is a false equivalent, because the sports fund is a wallet. The National Infrastructure Fund is a mortgage. And a debt is defined by who pays it, not the names. What we are having here is rebadging, is changing label, but it's still debt.
Okay.
No,
so allow me
that.
to link what you're going to say to a question. Is that according to Arnold's assertions here, what's to guarantee that 500 billion shillings in a kitty is actually going to be used towards development? And should we not have been hearing what that would actually be? And I think we actually often use development without really applying what it is, because development is not major infrastructure. That's not development. Major infrastructure is major infrastructure. It contributes to development, but it's not development. However, what's to guarantee? Because remember, I said the CS is very clear on one of the things, is that government as itself, with all its multiplicity of departments and organizations and directors, is unable to do this thing that this now new limited liability company is going to do. What's to guarantee that this will actually happen? After 2 years, will Kenyans be with their hands in their lap saying, oh my God, another 500 billion shillings down the drain?
Yeah, actually, that connects with the question posed earlier on by Dennis, and it appears that maybe Dennis is studying for an MBA, and it's a question which people have been asking, and it's even a philosophical question in business administration, that does the government actually have business in government, or they should leave business for the private sector? Because we are told that the private sector is more efficient and effective. If you're talking about the case of, for example, Safaricom for a long time used to be a small department within KPTC then. Yeah. And then when it was operating as a department, it used to do poorly. And I've got an issue with Safaricom. But when the administration took the decision that it's going to be privatized, then now you have Safaricom, which has become one of the giant organizations in Africa, simply because it was privatized. And you remember, the person who presided over the privatization was Musalia Mudavadi. So privatizing Safaricom, in my view, giving these shares, it's not a big deal, provided it's done in a manner which is transparent.
The majority shareholder is not the Kenya government.
No, but you know, it used to be a department
when
of...
you say that Safaricom succeeded because it was privatized,
wait.
it's not true.
No,
It's
you know,
not correct.
you had your time to speak. Now, Safaricom initially was a department of KPTC. So KPTC was 100% owned by the Kenyan government. So there were all those processes. Now, Safaricom became very efficient and effective when it was under private sector leadership, not under public sector leadership. Now, there's been questions on how to value the Safaricom share. And there are many methods of valuing a company, as there are grains of sand in maybe Lake Victoria or the Indian Ocean. But the most reliable one is the market share. There are people who are buying and selling Safaricom shares have agreed on a particular price. Maybe it's 27, 28, and they're doing it at 34. Maybe what again people are supposed to be looking at it as the merits and demerits of using the share price. Because, for instance, if you want to sell this property over here, you can put up an advert in the newspaper. You say, I want to sell this property. And there are so many valuation methods. You can say that this property, if it's, say, for rental purposes, how much rent am I going to get in the next 100 years? What is the value of this land? There are so many valuation methods.
But Makua, so that we don't go off the slippery slope here, just hang on.
I'm coming back to know what you are saying.
This is the very clear question here, that taking all of the things that you said and placing it in the reality that is Kenya, based on lived experience, what is to guarantee that the sale, the divestiture of these funds, of government stake to a certain percentage, is going to result in the addition to development that we have spoken about?
Now, that is the core of the issue. And we've spoken about it, that the challenge with the administration is the trust deficit or trust crisis. That whatever the administration wants to do, even when ill-intentioned, people will always smell a rat. And that is the import of communication. That you must tell your citizens, partners, and stakeholders why you are doing this thing. And you have to explain it into detail, even if you're going to do it for hours on end. But if you present the information in a condescending manner, then people are not going to pay attention. And then it goes to the legal framework that we spoke about earlier on, that how are you going to immunize this fund from corruption or from misuse?
Right.
Now, how to do that immunization is to have a very solid legal framework with very clear penalties, whether they are criminal penalties or pecuniary penalties. But the most important thing, the key success factor, is having persons with meritocracy, that you have your sharpest tool in the shed. That means character, capacity, and competence. And you have to convince people that whatever you are doing is serving their selfish interest, and give them reasons. And for instance, I don't understand why the guys who are doing the communications have not used the Canadian example or the Chilean example or the Indian example, or now these things have worked before. Now, Kenyans have got very valid reasons to suspect whatever the government is doing, to look into mischief. And one wouldn't blame Maliba for doing that, because again, in every government transaction, every politician wants to get some bonga points. But for me, I think the buck stops with the people who are promoting this thing, to promote it and tell us why we need it. Because if the government wants to raise more resources, maybe to do the roads, like for instance, I come from the western part of Kenya, where having infrastructure is something that is a rare occurrence. You see, like for instance, where I was born and brought up, a few days ago when people were installing a transformer, people broke into a dance and song. And then the rest of Kenyans were yawning and rolling their eyes, asking,
did the lights actually go on?
Why this guy is dancing because of a transformer? It's because most people in that part of the world have not interacted with these large-scale development projects. I was having a conversation over Uji with some leaders from Mount Kenya, and they said elected leaders today struggle to get a road to tarmac. Yeah, but if you go to most parts of Western Kenya, if you're looking for a tarmac road, you have to walk for hours on end. So in my view, part of what this infrastructure fund is going to cure, or rather, is to introduce equity and equality in resource allocation.
But Dismas, these leaders that you are discussing this conversation about Uji with managed to tarmac all these roads at a time when all these infrastructure fund was not there. That means it was prudent use and proper utilization of policy that we do have and budgetary processes in the National Assembly. I reckon that with proper utilization of resources that the Republic of Kenya has, that if KPC is there and is not operating at its optimum, that it is upon the Kenyan government to ensure that the bureaucracies that do exist, that is stopping KPC from performing as it should be fixed. Problem is not in coming up with the infrastructure fund and privatizing public resources for them to perform well. Fact that the government of Kenya has admitted that all these resources it has are not performing at optimum simply because of bureaucracies is an indictment on government itself, and that the government needs to fix itself for Kenyans to reap benefits from it. We talk about Mumias Sugar, Sony Sugar, we talk about Trans Nzoia. These are companies that we saw them perform in this very same company. It is mismanagement that happened by the very same government. If we fix the messes in the government and ensure that we support these companies to work well, we don't have to privatize. Arnold, you would respond to that as well.
No, but before it comes, again, do raise a very fundamental issue around commercialization of these companies. Again, part of the challenge is why you have many of these parastatal and government agencies failing to meet their obligation is because they are not run with commercial intention. And I think every president from the time we attained independence, for some reason, they wanted to introduce reforms to the parastatals. I remember there is an Abdul Kadir and Awondo report lying somewhere collecting a lot of dust on the need of making sure that these parastatals or government-owned corporations are run on commercial basis. Now, if you're going to appoint people for some reason wants political office and you give them responsibilities, as soon as they take office, for them they're looking at the next election. They do not want to run it on a commercial basis. And Kenya has got lots of talent that can run companies on a commercial basis.
You know, when I listen to Mokua, I feel like he's auditioning for a job. I feel like he's out there interviewing or rather presenting his CV and trying to pitch like, look this side, this is where you get the kind of talent to run what you guys are trying to do.
Why?
He even says that the problem in Kenya is trust deficit. That's victim blaming. We Kenyans do not have trust deficit because it is our problem. It is our reaction to what the government is doing. You know, when you call equity free money, you know you are lying. You are calling equity free money, quote unquote, as in you guys don't worry. This is a miracle cure. We are going to bring in. You will not suffer. You will not pay taxes.
Yeah.
You will not have any pain, and therefore you are just going to have goodies. As in somehow we are presenting the National Infrastructure Fund as manna from heaven. That's not true. And then when Mokua speaks about Safaricom, the Safaricom miracle must actually be spoken for what it is. It is theft of public resources.
How so?
When he says that Safaricom is actually a good example of how what you can get when you privatize. Number one, Safaricom literally has been a monopoly. Those are hard conversations we don't want to talk about because initially it was never, when it was a directorate at KPTC, it was a directorate in charge of mobile telephony. So at that particular point, there are two issues that the whole world was on the verge of breaking into mobile telephony. So you move out because KPTC, what ended up being Telcom then, eventually, holds national co-infrastructure. NIS uses that, the military uses that, and everybody else. That's why even after we made a mistake of selling Telcom, we still found ways of buying it back. It takes care of some very sensitive core stuff. But when Safaricom, quote unquote, ended up privatized, what happened is that it was heavily subsidized by public money. We don't want to talk about that. Other competitors could not get the advantage Safaricom got. The politicians of the day, Mobitelia and the others, ended up stealing. They didn't put in anything, but they ended up with, as in, it's like occult money from nothing. People woke up in the morning, they signed papers, and they ended up with shares. So if you're going to point out Safaricom, you should actually look at the history of how a lot of KPTC facilities were leveraged on by Safaricom until it was able to stand on its own. So it's a history that we don't want to talk about. It's a commercial history we don't want to talk about. But be that as it may, can we actually just be fair and say that from where we sit today, here, this thing has nothing to do with what Moko is telling us. It's about power. It's about elections. And it's about money. Money that does not have oversight. The president wants to be re-elected. That is why he has promised all those roads, the ones that he actually was promising last year in the State of the Nation address. That is why when you speak, once the word leverage comes in, you know that we are going the securitization way. And when you're talking about securitization, it will be against the money that we've collected, against assets, against future revenues. So you show up, and clearly he's talking about a 5 trillion fund. So this 5 trillion fund, if you're going to leverage on it, you raise a little money, you go into the equity market, you raise as much money as you want against assets, against the assets, future revenues. So what we are doing here, and we are telling people this is not a debt. You're calling it a non-debt. You want to call equity that is actually leveraged a non-debt, really? You are simply changing labels. So who's going to pay for that?
So what we want to do essentially from things like this is then to be able to raise the national psyche around some of these issues. And I'm still hard-pressed to find the indicators that would point to this fund being used for the things that it says it's going to be used for.
Actually, just
I want,
before Mokwa comes in.
Yeah, I want to understand where that Kenyans would be convinced to say actually yes. And for me, not for me, I mean the people who have written books, the people who have published, the people who have studied this thing, that development cannot be measured until and unless people's livelihoods get better, until you're able to look at things like education, health. You are able to then look at a network that's able to connect things like farm to market, whereby a conducive environment for business can actually thrive. That's how you measure development, not by mega infrastructure. Mega infrastructure could be an aider and an abettor to development, but it is not development. You cannot look at a road and say that is development. It's very clear.
Unfortunately, in this country, a road will actually come in as development. That's why a pier by the lake is seen as a major development. But I need to say, Mokua, I know him as a very good accountant. Mokua, when you call equity free money, as an accountant, you know that is accounting theater. You know that. When equity is actually acquired by way of collateralization, that is not reducing debt. That is hiding debt. So when we go the NIF way, and one of our marketing lines is that now we will be, we are no longer raising debt. The public debt remains the same. We are simply hiding debt. And by the way, one of the best way countries are actually hiding public debt. It moves away from the headline and now it becomes part and parcel of the footnotes, is by way of infrastructure funds. The best way to hide public debt is actually to go the fund route. And as it is in William Ruto's Kenya, I can tell you the only reason why this fund is actually almost an emergency is for three things. We want power in the next cycle. We are facing elections in less than 18 months. We need money for re-election.
Well, let me ask you this question. You're coming in just a minute. Because you, Arnold, could have been seen, you were a poster child for William Ruto. He held on to you in a very interesting manner because you would be essentially the face of the youth movement for UDA. Are you saying these things because you were close and you would understand how they think and operate?
Let me say this. And for purposes, so you know these are the scenes of youth. You live with them. You go to places. But I will say this. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt and come back. So I will speak from a place of perspective and say this, that look at everything we have sold. For example, look at the Hustler Fund as marketed to the people and Hustler Fund as marketed, or rather as delivered, implemented. If the Hustler Fund that William Ruto promised Kenyans met the Hustler Fund that my sister Susan Mangeni is currently implementing, they wouldn't know each other. And that has been the signature of doing things. Look at SHA as marketed by William Ruto and look at SHA as is being implemented today. If they met, they wouldn't know each other if they are Siamese twins, or rather if they are
Conjoined.
if they are conjoined twins. They are not. They don't know each other. So if you're going to look at the National Infrastructure Fund in its proper lens, I love Mokua's positiveness. I love his approach to ideal or what is ideal. But he forgets that he lives in Kenya.
Okay, now that I live in Kenya, I live in Kamin. Now, Kenya has got amazing talent, and I was surprised that one of the members in this studio has got a contrary view. I mean, Safaricom is managed by Kenyan talent. Equity is managed by Kenyan talent. KCB is managed by Kenyan talent. It means that if you place a premium, and I'll say this till the cows come home, if you place a premium on character, capacity, and competence, you'll always get it right. And for this fund to be a success, you must have that character, capacity, and competence, all these anchored in meritocracy. This trip that we are making to Singapore or South Korea, the reason why it cannot, I mean, one of the key success factors is meritocracy. Because if you do not reward meritocracy, if you don't have your sharpest tools in the shade taking leadership positions, then we may as well go.
Oh, come on,
making
Mokua,
progress.
come on.
So that is the first point.
Okay, at the very least, let's put the lights on. That when we even look at cabinet today, how have we seen meritocracy being practiced in Kenya in the last 3 years? Give me examples.
And you're supporting my proposition.
I'm looking for an example.
Yeah,
I'm looking for an example.
I'm saying that if you want to succeed, you must place a premium on meritocracy.
So are you saying that
you must have your sharpest
Please
tools?
listen. Are you saying that meritocracy has not then been practiced in Kenya, and that if you want to get to a point whereby you see some kind of proper development, that you should then apply the tenets of meritocracy? Has meritocracy been applied in Kenya to point toward the excellence that you're speaking about?
We've had challenges embracing
it's a yes or no, Mokua, come on.
Capacity and competence, and we have had challenges embracing meritocracy.
So it hasn't happened.
It's not happened the way one would have expected it. Because you remember, when the new Commissioner General for KRA was appointed and the CV was going around town, as you said earlier on, people said, wow, Ivy League. Now, there's some appointments which have made people start yawning. They even have running stomachs and wondering where have these individuals come from. That is the first point. And then you raised a very critical issue, that while infrastructure projects may not be defined as Maendeleo in my village, but what is the benefit of these infrastructure? Like, for instance, if you're talking about real estate, part of the reason as to why houses in Kenya are very expensive, number one is the tax component, which is about 52%, and is lack of serviced land. That if you're going to come up with a property, you need to do the roads, you need to do the basics. Now, if this fund can assist in that, I mean, the example I gave earlier on of Crystal Homes, they're coming up with beautiful properties. But the cost of coming up with these properties gets to be very high because you have to do all these infrastructure. And in my view, if you want to look at this infrastructure fund very well, you must look at it for what it is. Because the moment you introduce politics, then it's very easy to run around small circles. I mean, for instance, let's ask ourselves, as the equivalent in Canada worked, the infrastructure fund in Canada, has it worked? The equivalent in India, has it worked? What can we borrow from that? But if you come up with anything, today, if you come up with anything, people will look at it from a political lens and people will start yawning. Now, the other issue I was talking about, trust deficits, I'm not blaming the citizens for casting aspersions or questioning whatever the administration is supposed to be doing. Indeed, the Kenyan Constitution invites every single Kenyan to question what the government is doing. It's for that reason that you have a public participation. It's up to the leadership to make sure that that trust exists, because trust is the only glue which keeps the nation together. The moment that glue starts melting, then you get into a crisis. And then the last issue is the same Kenyans who said, you guys are overtaxing us. And there was even a proposal which went to the National Assembly, and when it was being debated, the members of the National Assembly took a particular position. When the president said, because of the pressure, I'm not going to sign these documents, I'm unhappy with it, the same members of the National Assembly who had said Hail Mary and said this is the best proposal in the world did a U-turn. They experienced the Damascus moment, and congratulated the president for his wisdom. Now, if you need resources for these projects, then you need to look at other innovative ways. And in my view, the infrastructure fund is a good model. Although now, like politicians, Maliba would do, they will always smell a rat, which is very okay. If I was in Maliba as a position, I would probably have very toxic views about this fund, because for some politicians, that is the only way of getting your bonga points. And we have a big challenge in Kenya, that we tend to oppose ideas not on the merit of the actual idea, but on who is proposing the idea. If it's Malibo was proposing this thing, he would go to the top of Mount Kenya and say it's an amazing thing. You'd recall a few days ago when Musalia Mudavadi spoke about the referendum moment. Instead of people looking at what he's proposing, they started attacking the personality. So in my view, what we must do is proactively remain to be active citizens and question everything that the government says, whether you like the president, whether you don't like him, but you must question, because this infrastructure fund is being done for the interest of all citizens.
And
all citizens must question the merits.
And I ask the question then, Maliba, that we find ourselves with this infrastructure fund predominantly because we have mismanagement the country's resources, and you're finding an easy way out other than fixing the real problems, which is corruption and mismanagement of resources. Because thing is, in Kenya, the problem is never funding. It is expenditure, theft, and corruption. That even if we go to infrastructure and we do not put in infrastructure fund, and there is no meritocracy, there is no guarantee that this fund will be used well, we are just transferring a problem to another entity altogether.
Then it's actually, before it comes down, I would add in, outside corruption, it's also incompetence.
Yes.
Yeah, outside corruption, we must add that incompetence.
We will have an opportunity to discuss how a competent government will run, how an ideal national infrastructure fund. We are talking about William Ruto's National Infrastructure Fund and how he has marketed it. It's being marketed, number one, as an undead. That's a lie. Those are the issues I'm raising. How, you see, infrastructure funds are structured globally is a good thing. But also we know that globally, off-balance financing, off-balance sheet, you know this one, like I'm telling you, we've run away from the budgeting cycle. We've run away from parliament. So this is off-balance sheet, the public balance sheet financing is actually how governments actually hide debt. They hide it in public sight. Because now you will no longer be talking about it because there is no accountability. Right. You are not going to talk about it. So it's
then
a
we're
footnote.
just doing the same thing.
So we are now hiding debt.
Yeah.
And by the way, debt is not defined by how you call it. Debt is defined by who pays it. So we will ask obvious questions. Who owns the public assets? Will the fund be, for example, be allowed to borrow against its own assets? Whatever it owns. Will it, for example, be allowed to leverage against the money it has? All those answers are yes. So when you sell equity as an undead, as free money, that is lying. And that is what I'm actually addressing. That the fund as is the premise that is being used to market it already is faulty. So based on that alone tells you that we are headed into bad waters. We are headed directly into a storm. And knowing too well, like we have actually normalized, like we are seated here, we are looking so calm, yet the headline, the nation speaks about 11 billion shillings are lost to Shah.
Yes.
11 billion shillings. Now that looks like it's pocket change. We have been normalized. And when you hear the good talk by these risk analysts here,
the risk.
Yes, the risk. No, he's calming us. He's calming us. Funds work elsewhere, ideas are good and not personalities. You see, you cannot separate a political idea from politics. Why then shouldn't we respond to an idea from a politician? And like I have told you, in Kenya today, the definition of a scandal is anything in the public world that has got serious presidential level marketing and endorsement. If you see the president moving around, like for example, today we're talking about this Nyota thing, and the president is all over is running around. By the end of the day, already, like out of the 5 billion shillings, 1 billion shillings has been used.
For running around.
And consultants and whatever. You know that normally a good fund should not have more than 3% of the money going to administration. Already, 1 billion plus Out of 5, honestly. So then what are we leaving to the young people out there? But it's marketed big. So the definition of a scandal in Kenya is anything that has got serious presidential marketing and endorsement. And that we will not be talking about it's free money, there's no taxation and everything else. But who's going to pay? Whose assets are they? So long as it is about the future taxpayer, future revenue that is actually being collateralized, we are talking about leveraging. We are going into the equity money. We are already lying to Kenyans. And as the pitch, the elevator pitch for this fund is already a con game. So if you try to confuse those, if you want to say like this is a good idea, it works elsewhere and everything else, then you are forgetting where we are. We must actually live today in the situation we are in, appreciate it before we talk about the future. So one day we might actually have a national infrastructure fund that works. But this one by William Ruto is actually William Ruto's Anglo leasing. It's actually William Ruto's golden bag. This is going to be Kenya's mega scandal. And since we know Parliament is actually going to endorse this process, that's why they're actually in court. The court stopper is simply a speed bump. We do not have a parliament, so that is just a rubber stamp. They're going to rubber stamp the process. William Ruto will have his way, bring in money from Safaricom shares, bring in money from KPC, and with that, he will rush into the equity money, or rather into the equity market, collateralize it, or rather, they are using a very good word, leveraging. Securitize it, get 1-2 trillion, and when you have got so many construction sites across the country, in William Ruto's world, they will actually take at least 30% of that money as goodwill, kickbacks, and with that you have at least 500 billion shillings going into campaigns. So they will buy people's loyalty.
I tended to believe because he was inside this place from a point know how.
The poster child for campaigns. We have 10 seconds, Mokua.
Yeah, the challenge of discussing the infrastructure fund with a politician with a very good storyteller, you can easily think the infrastructure fund is a bad thing. But in my view,
I'm saying William Ruto's infrastructure fund, not infrastructure, all of them.
In my view, for us to make progress, and I did accounting.
We got 3 seconds now.
Yeah, ACCA. And my friend here, Maliba, has misplaced so many accounting terminologies, so many economics terminologies that has made a good project look bad. But the closing word is undo. And this is something that we must remind every single day, is that we must reward character, capacity, and competence. Thanks. All said and done. You remember we had a constitution, and people said this is a horrible constitution. But what happened when Mwai Kibaki checks in? With that constitution, there was leaps and bounds.
All right.
So we must place a premium on that.
It's 2 minutes past 8 o'clock. Gentlemen, it's good that we can have these conversations, but I think this one we're going to leave it on a cliffhanger because the jury is still out in the minds of people, and I think that's where it's very important. Arnold Maliba, thank you. Ayajayi, thank you for being here this morning. And Dismas Mokua Asante for joining us.
You did say
the political risk analyst.
Thank you.
Asante, gentlemen, thank you. At 2 minutes past 10, good morning.
The latest news from around the world. 94.4 Spice FM.